Hey everyone, and welcome back to Tech Talk Central. I'm Nathan,
And I'm Sarah.
and we are diving into a viewer question today about a pretty big decision.
Yeah, choosing a new TV. It can definitely be a bit overwhelming with all the different options and technologies out there.
For sure. So we got a question from a viewer who's trying to decide between two specific Samsung TVs, both 65-inch models. One's an OLED, the other's a QLED. They really want to get a handle on what those terms actually mean for their viewing experience.
Right, because it's not always as simple as one being better overall. Each
Oh.
has its own strengths and weaknesses, and those impact not just how things look, but also how much you're going to be spending.
Exactly. So let's break it down. The two models our viewers looking at are the Samsung S85D, that's the OLED, and then the Samsung Q60D, which is the QLED option. Sarah, let's start with that OLED model. What were some of the standout features or specs that jumped out at you?
Well, the first thing that always grabs my attention with OLED is the picture quality. It's just in a different league, especially when it comes to contrast.
Okay, so we got to explain why. What is it about OLED that makes that contrast so much better?
Sure. So with OLED, each individual pixel emits its own light. Think of it like a tiny light bulb. So when a pixel needs to be black, it's completely off. No light at all.
Ah, I see. So that's how you get those super deep blacks that people rave about with OLED.
Exactly. And then when the pixel needs to be bright, it can really crank up the intensity. So you get this incredible range from absolute darkness to brilliant highlights, all in the same scene.
That makes a lot of sense. And I see here that the S85D also mentions Pantone-validated color accuracy. Now, I know Pantone from the design world, but what does that mean for someone watching TV at home?
It's basically a seal of approval for color. Pantone sets the standards for color matching, like across different industries, so when a TV is Pantone validated, you can trust that the colors you're seeing are incredibly accurate.
Like what the director intended, basically.
Exactly. If you're someone who really cares about seeing films as they were meant to be seen, or if you're into photography and want those colors to be spot on, then Pantone validation is a big plus.
Okay, I'm sold on the color part. Now, there's this real depth enhancer thing they mentioned. Does that have anything to do with 3D?
No 3D glass is required for this one. This is all about making the image appear more three-dimensional, even though it's a flat screen.
So how does it do that? Magic.
Pretty close. It uses AI to analyze what's on the screen and then subtly enhances the contrast between objects in the foreground and background.
So things pop a little more.
Exactly. It mimics how our eyes naturally perceive depth.
Cool. All right, moving on to another spec that often catches people's eye, the refresh rate.
Yeah.
The S85D boasts a 120 Hz refresh rate with something called motion accelerator. I know gamers love high refresh rates, but why should the average person care about this?
So a higher refresh rate means the screen can update the image more times per second. What that means for you is smoother motion, especially when things are moving fast on screen.
Like sports or action movies?
Exactly. You'll get less blur and judder, so the action looks clearer and more realistic.
So it's not just about things looking fast, it's about them looking smooth and natural.
Right. And for gamers, that responsiveness can be the difference between winning and losing.
And for the rest of us, it just means a more enjoyable and immersive viewing experience.
Absolutely. And to really complete that immersive experience, the S85D goes all out on audio too. It's got Dolby Atmos and something called object tracking sound light, which basically creates a virtual 3D soundscape.
So like surround sound without a bunch of speakers.
Exactly. The sound actually moves around you, following the action on the screen.
Ooh, that's pretty fancy. Now let's address the elephant in the room when it comes to OLED burn-in. I know some people are hesitant to go OLED because they've heard stories about images getting permanently etched into the screen. How worried should we be about that these days?
It's definitely a valid concern, and it was a bigger issue with early OLED TVs, but the technology has come a long way.
So the burn-in risk is lower now.
Much lower. Manufacturers have implemented all sorts of safeguards, and as long as you're not displaying a static image for hours on end, you shouldn't have any problems.
So no falling asleep with the news on all night.
Probably a good idea to avoid that, yeah. But normal viewing habits shouldn't cause any issues.
Okay, that's reassuring to hear. So OLED sounds pretty tempting so far, but it usually comes with a higher price tag, right?
That's true, which is why a lot of people are also considering QLED TVs, which tend to be more budget-friendly. The Samsung Q60D, the one our viewer is looking at, is a great example of that.
Perfect. So let's dive into that QLED world next. What makes QLED tick, and how does it compare to what we've just learned about OLED?
Okay, so QLED, it stands for quantum dot LED, and basically it's a way to enhance the color and brightness of a traditional LED TV.
So it's still using a backlight, like those older LCD TVs we're all familiar with.
Yeah, exactly. But instead of just white LEDs, it uses these tiny nanocrystals called quantum dots. They emit different colors of light depending on their size.
So you're essentially adding a layer of color-boosting tech on top of the regular backlight.
That's a great way to put it. And this allows QLED TVs to produce a much wider range of colors, which makes the picture look more vibrant and realistic.
And this Q60D model we're looking at also has something called dual LED backlighting. What's that about?
So normally an LED TV just has one type of LED backlight, but this one uses two, cool and warm LEDs. By adjusting the mix of these LEDs, the TV can create a more nuanced and balanced color temperature.
So it's aiming for better contrast by having more control over the light source itself.
Exactly. It's not going to be quite as good as the pixel level control you get with OLED, but it's definitely a step up from basic LED TVs.
Okay, makes sense. Now, what about motion handling on the Q60D? It mentions motion accelerator, but there's no specific refresh rate listed like there was with the OLED.
Right, so it probably means it's a standard 60 hertz panel. That's perfectly fine for most content, but you might notice a little bit of blur or judder during fast-paced action scenes compared to the 120 hertz OLED.
Got it. So maybe not the best choice for the hardcore gamers or sports fans who demand the absolute smoothest motion.
Yeah, probably not. But for most people, 60 hertz is still going to look pretty good.
All right. And how does the Q60D stack up in the audio department? Does it have all those fancy 3D sound features like the OLED?
It does have object tracking sound light, which means the audio will still move around to match the action on the screen.
So you still get some of that immersive effect.
You do. But it doesn't have Dolby Atmos, which the S85D has, so the sound quality might not be quite as nuanced or precise.
I see. It seems like they've included some of the premium audio features, but maybe a slightly stripped-down version to keep the cost down.
Right. And speaking of cost, that's one of the biggest advantages of the Q60D. It comes in at a significantly lower price point than the OLED.
That's definitely appealing, especially if you're on a budget. I'm noticing, though, that it comes bundled with an extended protection plan, which the OLED doesn't. Any thoughts on why that might be?
That's interesting. It could just be a marketing tactic to give buyers a little extra peace of mind.
Since they might be a bit hesitant about a newer technology like QLED.
Maybe. Or it could suggest that they expect QLED panels to have a slightly shorter lifespan compared to OLED.
That's something to consider. Okay, so we've got OLED with its amazing contrast and perfect blacks, but a higher price tag. And then QLED, which is more affordable, but might not be quite as impressive in terms of picture quality. How do these differences actually play out in real-world viewing? Like, if you're settling in for a movie night, which tech would you recommend?
Ooh, that's a good question. For a truly immersive cinematic experience, especially if you've got a dedicated home theater room with controlled lighting, OLED is going to be tough to beat. Those deep blacks and nuanced shadows really add to the atmosphere and make you feel like you're right there in the movie.
So if you're a serious cinephile, OLED is probably the way to go.
I would say so, yes. But if you're more of a casual viewer, or if you watch a lot of TV in a brightly lit room, QLED might actually be a better choice.
Because of the higher brightness.
Exactly. QLEDs can get much brighter than OLEDs, which helps to combat glare and reflections from windows or lights.
So for those daytime viewing sessions or rooms of lots of natural light, QLED could be the winner. What about gaming? Both TVs have features aimed at gamers, but is there a clear advantage for one technology over the other?
That's a tough one because they both have their strengths. OLED has incredibly fast response times and minimal input lag, which is super important for fast-paced games. You don't want any delay between your controller inputs and what's happening on the screen.
Makes sense. So for those hardcore gamers who need every millisecond on their side, OLED might be the way to go.
Yeah, I think so. But QLEDs also have a lot to offer gamers, especially in terms of visual spectacle. That high peak brightness and wide color gamut can really make games look incredible.
So it's almost a trade-off, isn't it? OLED for the ultimate responsiveness, QLED for the eye candy.
I think you've nailed it. And of course, the choice also depends on the types of games you play. If you're into fast-paced shooters or racing games where split-second timing is crucial, OLED might be the edge. But if you prefer more story-driven or visually rich games where immersion is key, QLED could be a better fit.
It's fascinating how each technology has its own strengths and weaknesses, and how the best choice really depends on your individual needs and priorities. And I think that's a good reminder for all our tech decisions. There's no one-size-fits-all solution. It's all about understanding what matters most to you and then finding the tech that aligns with those priorities. Well, this has been a fascinating deep dive into the world of OLED and QLED. It's clear both technologies have a lot to offer, and the best choice really boils down to individual needs, preferences, and of course, budget. There's no single right answer, which can be frustrating, but it's also kind of exciting. There's a solution out there that's perfectly tailored to each person. It's just a matter of figuring out what matters most to you.
I completely agree. And it's amazing how far TV technology has come. We're really spoiled for choice these days.
We are. And on that note, I want to remind everyone that we've included links to the Samsung S85D and the Q60D in the description below so you can check out the latest prices and deals.
And of course, if you found this deep dive helpful, please hit that subscribe button and join our community here at Tech Talk Central.
We love having you along for the ride. And remember, we're always here to help you navigate the ever-changing world of technology, one gadget at a time. Until next time, happy viewing.